Hello everyone, and welcome to News for Our Future. Today we are hosting a special program on education. It is hard to make development work in any country if you can't bring up the educational standards of each country. We are fortunate to have two members who have worked with our task since its founding, who are currently training to be educators. Jessica Wessel is the development coordinator for our task while working on her master's degree at George Mason University in environmental management. She has been working in education in Loudoun County for 7 years, 3 years as a technology assistant and 4 years as a substitute teacher. Greg D'Addario is a recent graduate of Roanoke College and has a Virginia elementary teaching license. He is currently working on his master's in sustainable systems. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Hello. Okay, to start things off, how did you guys get interested in education? What made the prospect of being an educator so appealing to you guys?
Well, my mom is a kindergarten assistant, and she's going to actually be a kindergarten teacher next year, but she's always been doing something with preschool or just some kind of education in her life. And when I was in middle school and high school, she was at an elementary school and kindergarten classroom, and I used to go and help, and I would just, file things, work, help with the calendar, help count, help word sort, do that kind of stuff. And somebody finally looked at me one day and said, you would probably be good at this. So I kind of took that as, well, that's a hint. So I eventually decided that that's what I wanted to do with my life. So that's why I went to get my teacher's license, and I've accomplished that so far. And I'm going to get my master's. Not related to education, but I want to bring that field into education more, which is something we'll be talking about later.
And I've also had an early experience with wanting to be an educator. I've had two passions in my life, the environment and education. And they kind of go hand in hand, and that's what I'm trying to work on. But one of the earliest memories I have is babysitting a little boy down the street who didn't know any English. His parents had adopted him from a Spanish-speaking country, and I knew Spanish from taking it in school. And I worked with him and taught him simple English phrases, and his parents were astounded and said, you should be a teacher. And ever since then, it's kind of been, that's something I'm striving towards.
Great. Okay. Well, so why, in your opinion, is education so important?
Well, I think education is, the foundation for everything you do in life. The decisions you make day to day, you're educated. Your education, you fall back on that. You go to the store, you see something's cheaper. Well, logically, that you'd rather buy that than another product that's more expensive that you get the same thing out of. And everyday decisions with that in terms of what you're consuming, what you're buying at the grocery store, what you're buying clothing-wise, everything you do, driving, walking. Everything that you do in life comes from some kind of education, something that someone told you, something you saw. So I think education really is the foundation for what you do, and I think if we're able to increase education about sustainability, about environment, and about important issues like that, what we've been talking about on some of the other news programs, poverty, global development, that kind of stuff, people are going to be able to do that kind of, subconsciously. They won't have to think about it. They're just going to know about it already because they've grown up knowing they've grown up knowing nothing different. They've always known about sustainability issues, environmental issues, and they'll kind of grow up with that understanding. I think today we haven't been taught that as much, so unfortunately our education has failed us, and we have to learn about it, as we're going. So I think in the future, our education can, it's important as it is, but I think it's kind of failed us, and we need to just, in the future, we need to have education with sustainability and environment.
So why do you think education is so important?
I agree with Greg. It's the foundation for where our society is built. If we don't teach our children, and if we don't teach ourselves, how can we progress? How can we learn from, what worked or what didn't work? How can we explore the unknown without having that? That is education. So without that basis, there's nothing to move towards.
So from your perspective as educators, why is it so hard to change people's minds about different ideas and on different issues?
Greg pointed out just a couple minutes ago that we get these concepts when we're really young. So if we don't start teaching the children when they're younger, then they're not going to understand. I apologize.
I mean, it's clearly it's difficult to change if they've been taught something a certain way, you know, and as Greg was saying, sustainability is not in education now and it's failed us, then it's going to be hard to change their ideas because they've been brought up thinking that it's not as important as, you know, history, English, you know, those core subjects.
And I mean, going off what you said, when you're brought up, you know, with the norm being you have to drive 20 minutes or half an hour to like the closest Walmart, and that's your source of food and your source of like clothes and, you know, all your everyday things. I mean, that's what makes sense to you. You're going to grow up and expect you're going to move to a new place and go, where's the closest Walmart? You're not going to think about like the farmer's market or, you know, the general store. I mean, I think if the way we live our lives is so built on what we know and what we don't know. And I think education is a lot of, I mean, it is what we don't know and what we do know. So I think to change our system for the better in terms of environmental sustainability, we definitely need to, a lot of what we don't know needs to be in our education system, which I think, again, we're going to address later too.
So I guess kind of going off of, you know, our general theme of environment and sustainability, humans are doing a lot of destructive things to the environment. Where did humans learn how to do this? Where did they, you know, why are they doing this? What has education done to make them do this, do you think?
I'm not sure if it's something that education has done. It's something that society has allowed them to do, because we've seen that we can just keep taking and taking and taking, and that allows us to accumulate more and accumulate wealth. And that's where our society is built upon. It's not looking at those environmental sustainability factors where you really look at the environmental impacts on what you're doing. The classic, you know, tragedy of the commons is a great example, because you can use different examples with the tragedy of the commons, but for example, if there were a pasture and everyone shared that pasture and everybody could only have one cow on that pasture, well, all of a sudden that one person's going to want to have two, or one person's going to want to have two, another person's going to want to have two, and they just keep taking more and more. So it's almost the absence of education and taking that retrospective look about what is going to happen if. I think it's more of that concept, not necessarily that education has allowed it, but it has fostered it because it hasn't caused it to change.
I don't think you can just say, you know, blame education as much as you can say blame the government, blame corporations. I mean, it's definitely it's a societal structure that has set this up. I mean, education is definitely one important part of the equation, but it's not the only part. So I think, I mean, it's definitely, you know, I'm a little biased being an educator. I think it's one of the most important ones, but I don't think you can just blame it without, you know, saying, well, government, corporations, there are a number of institutions that are also involved and responsible for the way we live our lives.
Yeah, education is definitely, you know, it's not the problem, but maybe it can also be the solution. So why do you think that how important is it to educate young children on these issues?
Extremely. Kids are so impressionable, and that's where we get our day-to-day routine activities from. You know, like Greg mentioned, going to the store, if you're going to drive 20 minutes to go to the store, that's what you're used to. But kids still are forming their opinions about the world around them. So they still have that opportunity to make that choice. So if we give them that little bit more information, then maybe they can make the better choice. I'm not saying that adults don't necessarily have that opportunity, but they've kind of already developed those mindsets of that they're already set into that, oh, this is what I want and I don't want to change because of that.
I think, you know, the stereotypical child is, you know, the one you see in class raising their hand, or like the 2-year-old who's always like, why? I mean, anything you say, they ask why? And I think that's good, and that curiosity can help, because the rest of society is just drudging along with life with blinders on, kind of, they don't question what they're doing. And I think kids offer a wonderful opportunity for them to say why. I mean, it might be the most obvious question, and you kind of stand back and you go, duh, like, why didn't I think of that? I mean, somebody's finally asking that question, and they don't have the blinders yet. I mean, they're still curious, they're open about the world, and I think, we need to take advantage of that curiosity.
Well, in my experience, I've been at a school for 3 years now, and with elementary school children, and they're starting to notice that something is wrong. They're getting some more information than I did when I was in elementary school, especially even high school, and they're starting to learn some of these things about climate change, about resources, about, it might be very simple, but they are starting to get that there's something else going on, that I think they're at the advantage because of their education, that they're receiving this now.
So you mentioned that was one of your experiences in the classroom. What have been some other experiences you both have had in the classroom? Is it what you expected to be as an educator?
Well, generally, I'm disheartened by the lack of science in the classroom. I student taught this past spring, and then I was also a long-term substitute. And most of the day was English, then lunch, of course, and then you had math. Now, that was basically it. You had your specials, and then maybe there would be a half an hour to cover science, social studies, handwriting, health, like the other subjects that aren't being pushed right now. So that was kind of disheartening. I mean, history has its own adage, if you fail to learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. I mean, I think there's something to be said for science too. It just doesn't have its own catchy slogan yet. So I think, from my experience, the lack of science and social studies and history in the curriculum that's being taught in the classroom was kind of a big shock, because when I was there, we had to do a science fair project every year in elementary school. That was, we actually talked about the science fair project in the classroom. We kind of prepped for it. We did the scientific method. And now I think that's more and more, it's just being cut because English and math are just being pushed so hard.
Yes, and I've seen some of the experiences of the constraints and the limitations that my teachers are under that I work with. And they have a certain thing that they need to teach, and they need to get it done within a certain period of time. So some of the other subjects kind of, not that they want to necessarily, but they go by the wayside because they need to get those standards in so that they are able to take the tests in May.
So you mentioned the tests in May. We've been hearing a lot about the standards of learning. How do those work? And do these SOLs mention or educate on the issues that we might think are important? Like, for example, is ecology integrated into these tests?
Well, the SOLs are created by the state or the Commonwealth of Virginia, and every few years they get a number of educators together on a particular subject or a particular grade level, and they kind of just revise the standards. There are standards for everything from kindergarten to 12th grade. It gets a little more in depth when you get to the higher levels, obviously, but in terms of science, there's no mention of climate change, global warming, kind of the big issues that we think are important, global poverty, energy issues, that kind of stuff, and those are just completely left out. And I know Jess and I have been talking that we've seen that usually science in elementary schools is very, very, as we've been saying, it's just not existent. But third grade is kind of when suddenly it starts to get pushed. Well, that's when the science SOL test is given at the end of third grade. So suddenly it's kind of like make up for lost time. You have to cram all that science in. So I think, the tests definitely, as Jess said, you have to fit in a certain amount of your curriculum. You have to say, okay, you're going to learn about K1 today, like kindergarten 1 standard. Then, well, if you don't get to like K30, tough luck. That might be the science one that you just can't reach. So you have to get through a certain number of standards through the year, and hopefully they're ready for the test when they take it.
Well, and let's take a step back for a second. Most states in the United States have standards. They're just called different things, and they're all different. So, in talking about Virginia has the standards of learning. and only once is climate change mentioned. It's in somewhere in life science, I believe. But it's not really the climate change that we're kind of talking about. It's more of the cyclic, the patterns of the earth, that type of thing. It's not talking about the human accelerated climate change or global warming that we're thinking about. It's more of that textbook definition. Mm-hmm. So no, not the issues that we're trying to cover are not in the standards at this time.
So, I mean, you mentioned a lot of other states have their own tests. Are there any national standards?
Well, the presidential administration, Obama is trying to push, with his federal stimulus money, he's trying to push through some national Common Core standards is what they're called. And I think about maybe half the states have adopted these. But unfortunately, they only include English and math. And it says, while we understand that other subjects are important, we want to, finalize English and math, standards, and then we'll get to the other, important subjects like science and social studies. But I can't believe that's the mindset that we have, that, English and math are important, but, science, social studies, we'll get to them when we get to them, just no big deal.
I mean, I guess you've given the impression that, you're kind of, these standards have put a lot of constraints on the teachers. What do generally what do educators think about these standards, and are they really putting constraints? Have you seen that?
Yes and no. That's it's kind of an open-ended question, because I'm sure Greg would agree. The standards do place certain limitations. As we mentioned, you kind of have to not necessarily go through them in order, but there's a certain set that you need to meet so that the kids get the curriculum they need to pass the test and move on to the next grade and continue their education. But that does not mean that that's completely written in stone. There is still creativity allowed in the classroom. Teachers, there are many teachers can still work outside that box and come up with creative lessons and put things in here or there. But that's kind of, I think, where we come in. I think we can help them do that.
The bottom line is it's your classroom. You control what's going on in there. So yes, you have to meet certain standards, but the way you meet them can be different. You can incorporate different things into that standard. Like if you're doing an English or reading, spelling standards, you can incorporate your science or your social studies into that maybe. So, again, it's, yes, you have to meet certain things, but it is your classroom. You ultimately have the say of what goes on.
So, although there is, like, for example, in Virginia, there's a set curriculum that you have to meet those standards, they can still add in, they can, put science in math or something like that. So you have found that teachers can be flexible with those kinds of things given the curriculum. Okay.
Of course. There are many teachers that have a favorite subject or a favorite topic, so they may spend a little bit more time on that or find a way to, I like Greg's term of integrate. Integrating lessons is an amazing tool. You can get so much more done without just going math, English, health, and then go to your specials like PE or something like that. You can integrate those subjects.
So what about colleges? I guess your experiences have been with kind of the younger levels of education, but maybe when you guys were in college, or from anybody who's in college, like, what about the education that happens in the universities?
Colleges are unique compared to the elementary schools in the respect that they have the freedom to do almost anything. You sign up for classes and you pay them money to educate you, and if you don't like it, you can leave. It's public education. You have no choice. You can go there, you can go private, but private's a lot more money. So the universities tend to, they have much more freedom. And I took environmental policy as my major at Roanoke College, and I took classes ranging on everything from environmental sociology to environmental public policy. So at college, you get to kind of choose what you want to do. I, for one, like the freedom better of, being able to say, well, this is my track, so, I'm going to pick this course, I'm going to pick that course. And I think, at the university level, there's much more urgency maybe and understanding of that, global warming and climate change is a problem. There's a pact between certain colleges in the United States. I can't remember what it's called right now, but they've signed a declaration saying, climate change is happening. It's an urgent matter, and at a university level, through education and through actions, we can help with this. And I know Frostburg is signed that, and that's where you went.
Yes, I went to Frostburg, and President Gibraltar did sign the Tellurres Declaration to move Frostburg to become a more sustainable campus. And they also received a grant to put in a wind turbine on campus. But Greg's right, there's a lot more freedom. The professors in the department are the ones that kind of come up with the curriculum, so there are not really any set standards. But we can help with both high school and colleges by offering presentations. Many AP or advanced placement classes, allow for that opportunity of that a little bit of extra time to come in and talk and just do like we're doing now, talk about the issues and allow for that dialogue to happen. I think that's one of the best ways we can educate, is to allow those kids to explore the possibilities. But with colleges too, you can target a particular department. Like I attend George Mason University for my master's, and they have an environmental science and public policy department. So you can get up in front of them and say a little bit about kind of what we're doing, and I think that's one thing we can do to help out. Another way we can help, I think, is by offering resources. That's one thing, is there's a lot of jargon out there. There's a lot of things that the common person doesn't understand. I mean, I don't even understand it. But, I've been lucky to receive an environmental education where in college and in graduate school, but I definitely did not receive that, caliber of education when I was in high school. But we've taken time at our task to kind of make these reports and stuff a little bit more youth-friendly and a little bit more easier to understand. And on our Earth Wiki, I know I've led some of my 5th grade students to that resource, and a couple of my teachers as well who are working on their master's degrees.
So, I mean, even if we're not educators in the system, we can definitely help out with, helping educators to teach about these issues like climate change and global warming and things like that. I guess, what else can we do? Is there something that we can say to parents and students about education, and is there any other way that we can help educators?
I mean, parents can always be helpful by asking their teachers, in a nice way, why aren't you teaching such and such? I mean, if it's an important, if climate change is important to me and my child isn't receiving any education about that, I'm going to be upfront and, say, well, why aren't you learning about this? And I think, like Jess was saying, at high school levels, there's multiple opportunities for involvement. You can get involved with clubs. I mean, you can form your own club at the, there's not an environmental club or the one there that you don't like, you can kind of get involved and, help change it and make it look more like you want it to and act like you want it to. If they're only doing recycling, you can say, well, hey, there's more to recycling, there's more to being environmentally friendly than recycling. Let's do something else. So, when you're a parent, you can definitely get involved with your child's education by asking, well, why isn't this being taught? And you can always, supplement that at home. I mean, as Jess was saying, our website has multiple resources on it, www.ourtask.org. And, going there is definitely a place to start, if you want to teach your kids or teach anyone, teach your kids if they're your kids, or, if you're an educator, you can definitely start there.
Yeah, volunteer to go into your child's classroom and give a presentation, or contact one of us and we can help set something up. Also, I really like Greg's suggestion of supplement, because sometimes there aren't things that are covered that in the public education, and you can't cover everything. So supplementing at home is a great way to do that. And there are plenty of books out there, even for young kids, that teach about global climate change and resources and what's happening to our planet today.
Well, good. I mean, I'm glad that we can do something, and I think that a really good first step into helping out educators is awareness. So, thank you guys for helping us become more aware of the education system and what we can do to help in your own experiences. So, good luck with everything, and thank you so much for sharing your ideas.
Thank
you.
you.